There is a moment in every hero's life when they stop being ordinary. For most, it never comes. For Siegfried of Xanten, it came in a forest where the trees themselves had learned to fear. I am the wanderer. I collect stories that have outlived their tellers. This one begins with fire and the death of something ancient. But before the dragon, before the treasure, before the blood that would make him immortal, there was a boy, a prince, a son who broke his mother's heart by being exactly what she raised him to be. This is how legends are born, not in glory, but in the moment someone decides that safety is no longer enough. In the lowlands of the Rhine, where the river runs wide and slow, there stood a castle called Xanten. It was the seat of King Siegmund, a ruler whose name commanded respect across all the German lands, and his queen Siegelind, whose wisdom matched her beauty. They had one son, Siegfried. From the day he could walk, the boy was different, stronger than children twice his age, faster, fiercer. The swordmasters who trained him ran out of things to teach before he had hair on his chin. By 15, he had bested every knight in his father's court. By 18, there was no one left who would spar with him. Siegmund watched his son with pride and with fear. Pride, because what father does not wish for a strong son? Fear, because strength without purpose is a blade without a sheath, dangerous to everyone, most of all, its owner. On the day Siegfried came of age, Siegmund held a great feast. 400 young nobles were knighted alongside the prince. For 7 days, the halls of Xanten rang with music and laughter. Gold flowed from the king's hands like water. Siegelind herself oversaw the festivities, ensuring that no guest left without gifts. It should have been enough. For any ordinary man, it would have been enough. But Siegfried stood at the window of the great hall, watching the sun set beyond the Rhine, and felt nothing but restlessness. The tournaments bored him. The feasting felt hollow. He had won every competition, defeated every challenger, and discovered a terrible truth. Victory without risk is not victory at all. It is just routine.
Time now, long enough to forget what sunlight felt like on my skin. Long enough to stop counting the years, but I have not forgotten the hunger, that restless burning in my chest that drove me out of my father's house and into the wild places of the world. That need to prove myself against something worthy. I remember the night I told my father I was leaving. He was sitting by the fire in his private chambers, a cup of wine untouched at his elbow. He looked old to me then, though I know now he was younger than I am as I tell this tale. Worry ages a man faster than years. There are stories, I said, of a treasure in the north, a hoard so vast it took 100 wagons to carry it from the mountain where it was found. They say 2 kings guard it, brothers who trust no one, served by giants and a dwarf who knows secrets older than the world. My father did not look up from the fire. I have heard these stories. I mean to take it. Now he looked at me. His eyes held something I had never seen there before. Not anger, not disappointment, fear. The Nibelung Hoard has driven men mad, he said slowly. The kings who guard it have killed every challenger. 12 giants serve them, and the dwarf, Alberic, possesses a cloak that makes its wearer invisible. How do you propose to defeat what you cannot see? I will find a way. And if you die? I had no answer for that. Death was not real to me then. It was something that happened to other people, lesser people, people who lacked my strength and my certainty. My mother wept when she heard. I remember that. I remember the way she held my face in her hands and searched my eyes for something she could not find. You have everything here, she whispered. A kingdom, a people who love you, a future. Why must you seek destruction? Because I have everything, I said, and it is not enough. I did not understand until much later that I was not seeking treasure at all. I was seeking the one thing I had never known. I was seeking the feeling of being truly alive. The journey north took many weeks. I traveled with 12 companions, men who had sworn themselves to my service and who followed me now out of loyalty or curiosity, or perhaps simply because they had nothing better to do. The land grew wilder as we rode, forests thick as night, mountains that clawed at the sky, and always the whispers. Travelers who warned us to turn back, villagers who made signs against evil when they heard where we were bound. We found the Nibelung kingdom in a valley that sunlight seemed afraid to enter. The kings were waiting for us, Shilbung and Nibelung, brothers who had carved an empire from the bones of the earth. They stood before their treasure hoard, a mountain of gold and gems that blazed even in the dim light, and they made me an offer. "Divide it for us," Shilbung said. "We have quarreled for years over the division. Do this service, and we will give you the sword Balmung as payment." I should have seen the trap. Two kings who could not agree, asking a stranger to make a choice that would favor one over the other. But I was young, and I was proud, and the sword they offered was the finest blade I had ever seen. I divided the treasure. I do not remember now which brother received more. It did not matter. The moment I finished, both of them attacked. They had planned it from the start. No division would satisfy them. They simply wanted an excuse. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The brothers died first. Then their warriors, 700 of them, coming at me in waves. Then the 12 giants, each one twice my height, each one certain that size would defeat skill. It did not. When it was over, I stood alone in a field of corpses, Balmung red to the hilt, and I heard a sound behind me. A whisper of movement, the brush of cloth against stone. Alberic thought his cloak would save him. He thought invisibility meant invincibility. He learned otherwise. I beat him until he yielded. I took his cloak, the Tarnkappe, which could make its wearer not only invisible, but strong as 12 men, and I claimed the treasure of the Nibelungs, every last piece of gold, every gem, every ancient and terrible secret buried in that hoard. My men loaded it onto wagons, 100 wagons, just as the stories said, and we turned south, toward home, rich beyond the dreams of kings. But the treasure was not the greatest prize I claimed that day. That came later, in a forest where the shadows moved with purpose, and the air smelled of smoke and ancient malice. The dragon was waiting. I do not know if it guarded the Nibelung lands, or if it simply lived there, drawn to the gold like a moth to flame. I do not know if it was the last of its kind, or one of many. I know only that it was vast and terrible, and that when it rose from the trees before us, my men fled screaming into the forest. I did not flee. I stood my ground with Balmung in my hand, and I looked into eyes older than human memory, and I felt something I had never felt before. Fear. Not fear of death. Fear of insignificance. This creature had lived for centuries. It had watched kingdoms rise and fall. What was I to it but another mayfly, another brief flicker of warmth before the eternal cold? The dragon's fire came first, a river of flame that turned trees to ash and stone to slag. I dove behind a boulder, felt the heat sear my lungs, tasted smoke and my own mortality. Then I ran, not away, toward. I do not remember the blow that killed it. I remember only the impact, Balmung sinking to the hilt in the soft flesh beneath its jaw. I remember the scream, a sound that shook the mountains. I remember the blood, hotter than any forge fire, pouring over me in a tide of crimson and gold. And I remember the voice, faint, dying, but clear. "Bathe in my blood, little human. It will give you what you seek. My skin becomes your skin. My scales become your armor. No blade will ever pierce you. No arrow will find its mark. You will be invincible." I did not question it. I did not hesitate. I stripped off my ruined armor, and I plunged into the pool of dragon's blood. Let it cover every inch of my flesh. Let it burn and change and remake me. When I emerged, I was no longer entirely human. I was something new, something that had never existed before. I was Siegfried the Dragon Slayer, and I could not be killed. There is one thing more. One small thing, so small that I did not notice it until much later, when it was far too late. As I bathed in the dragon's blood, a leaf fell from the linden tree above me. A single leaf, no larger than my palm, drifting down on a breath of wind. It landed between my shoulder blades and stuck there. The blood did not touch that spot. The dragon's gift did not reach that small patch of skin. I did not know. How could I? I could not see my own back. And in the days that followed, as I tested my new invulnerability against blades and arrows and spears, no one thought to strike me there. Why would they? It is not a place any warrior aims for. It is not a place anyone would think to look. One small leaf, one moment of chance, one tiny imperfection in an otherwise perfect armor. That is all it takes. That is all it ever takes. The dragon gave me immortality with one breath and took it away with the next. I just did not know it yet. I would not know it for years, until a spring in a forest, and a spear thrown by a friend, and a cross sewn on my tunic by the woman who loved me most. But that is another story, a darker one, and I am not ready to tell it yet.
Here I must take the tale back from its teller. Siegfried's voice grows quiet when he speaks of what came next. Even the dead have their silences, their shames, their regrets. So let me tell you what he will not. Siegfried returned to Xanten covered in glory. His skin could turn any blade. He had a cloak that made him invisible. He had a sword that had killed kings and giants, and a dragon. He had a treasure that could buy empires. He had everything a man could want. His parents wept when they saw him, with joy, yes, but also with something else. They looked at their son, this creature of blood and gold and impossible power, and they saw what he could not. They saw a man who had never learned to lose, a man who did not know what it meant to be vulnerable, a man who would walk through the world believing himself untouchable, until the world taught him otherwise, and the world always teaches that lesson, sooner or later, one way or another. Not long after his return, Siegfried heard a rumor, a story carried by travelers from the south. There was a princess in Burgundy, they said, the most beautiful woman in all the German lands. She had refused every suitor. She had sworn never to love. Siegfried smiled when he heard this. He had never met a challenge he could not overcome. He began to prepare for a journey south, to a kingdom called Burgundy, to a city called Worms, to a woman named Kriemhild, who had dreamed of a falcon and sworn to keep her heart safe from harm. The falcon was already on his way, and so the threads of fate drew tighter. I am the wanderer, and I will see you in the void.